Okay, welcome everyone to Real People, Real Parenting. We're going to begin with a breath prayer tonight. If you're able to close your eyes and start a pattern of slow and intentional breathing, just as we breathe together, we can notice the gift of clean air and an abundance of air and our lungs to breathe it in and out. And we'll be breathing in and breathing out and hearing this prayer from Psalm 71. We breathe in, as for me, breathe out, I will always have hope. Breathe in, as for me, breathe out, I will always have hope. Breathe in, as for me, breathe out, I will always have hope. In, as for me, breathe out, I will always have hope. O God of each sacred breath, breathe rest into our weary bodies and souls. For children keep growing, seasons keep changing, and we keep waiting for a chance to catch our breaths. Help us hold space for hope with each inhale. When overwhelm holds our hearts, help us hold space for peace with each exhale. When information floods our minds, we're gasping for air, O God. Help us catch our breath and refresh our souls with the power of your Spirit. Fill our lungs with your peace so that we may rest. Fill our lungs with your peace so that we may keep going. Pour into us so we may pour into our children and clear the air for them to live into a better way. May your kingdom break into the smog of this world so we, all of us, may breathe a little easier. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
So I have a PowerPoint, but I don't need to do the PowerPoint. I can send it to you, and then you could go through it yourself. We could just start with questions. What's your preference? What would you like to do?
Either's fine with me.
Kelsey, do you have a preference?
I'd be interested to see the PowerPoint and then open up for questions at the end.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. If I can find it. Where is it? Where is it? And go down here. Okay. Share. Okay. So we'll start from here. I just called it Reading is Fun, How to Help Your Child Love Reading. And hopefully, I think a lot of you have children already that love to read. We know that reading's essential. It is the one thing we want every child to be able to leave school with, and because they need it every day. And so it's so important. We want our children to have a love of reading because reading is what takes us anywhere. As we're in this pandemic, we think about how we can escape, like Kelsey was talking about, escape to Asia and to a new country and find out about that. We can have a fantasy story and enjoy that. We can learn so much from reading. So I thought we'd take a minute and think about, what was your favorite book as a child and why?
Are you taking a poll?
No, I just
Oh.
want to hear what your favorite books
Oh,
were.
I mean, you want an answer, right?
Yes, I want to hear from you.
Okay, I'm gonna go first because I love this book, My Side of the Mountain.
Oh, I loved that book too.
Jean Craig had George,
Yeah.
and she was a fabulous author that wrote a lot about nature because she grew up in the woods kind of as a tomboy, but she wrote all these amazing stories about children, well, specifically this kid running away and living in the woods.
Yeah.
And for me as a child, that was like an escape. I could picture myself there, and also my parents didn't really get along, so I needed that kind of that peace, and that's why I am still in love with the woods today. Interestingly enough, I wrote her maybe 6 years ago, and she must have been like 6 months before she passed away, and she wrote me back.
Oh,
which
cool.
was incredible. So whenever she died, it was 6 months prior to that. But I just said, I just want you to know how much your books mean to me. And now I'm reading them to my children. And she was just so gracious and so like honored that I wrote her, which I thought was really cool. So I'll never forget that book series.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading that. I really loved that book.
Yeah, it's a trilogy.
I think I was like in 5th grade, 4th grade, or something like that, when I read it. So
yeah, it's an incredible trilogy.
Yeah.
I loved the Redwall Mossflower series by Brian Jakes. I don't know if I was maybe 3rd grade, 4th grade. They're kind of like a little bit older books, but I read every single one of those. I loved the detail that he used to talk about there was all these creatures that lived in Abbey, and it was like they were living human lives, but they were animals, and just the detail he would talk about the food that they ate and the quests that they went on. I absolutely love those books.
Weren't there a bunch of them?
A ton.
I think I might have the series still because Andrew read all of them.
Yep. There were like an initial like 3 or 4, and then he just kept writing and writing and writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. My son read every single one. I mean, he went crazy over them. So y'all are a lot younger than I am when I can tell you that my kids read all the things that y'all love. But stop laughing, Mikhail. And so y'all might not even know the ones I'm talking about, but I know, surprise Kathy, that I read voraciously. Anything I could get my hands on. There was a book back in the day, very, very, very old, called 17th Summer that my mom and dad said I couldn't read. So of course I read it when I was about 13. But as a child, my favorite books, as far as books, and I was reading chapter books probably by 3rd grade just because I read so much, was Bobbsey Twins, the Happy Hollisters, Nancy Drew, anything that was a series like that. And the Happy Hollisters was one of my favorite series because there were 5 kids in that family, and we had 5 kids in our family. And it was all about solving mysteries and working together. And same with the Bobbsey Twins and, all of those kinds of things. So if it was a series and there were kind of mystery to it, I was reading it.
Mikhail?
I don't recall anything from early, like young books, but there was in the library, the first time I remember really being excited for reading was these really thin books that were called like Superstar or something like that. And they were biographies on all kinds of, they went across kind of different industries. So it wasn't always sports. It was like, I remember reading, it's the first time I read about the Beatles, for instance. And then there was something on, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or whatever. And they were so small and easy to read. I read like every one of those. And then I got into, I liked the Hardy Boys, so talking about Nancy Drew. And then the other, I think his last name was Christopher, wrote the sports books. There'd be one about baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever. I read those just couldn't get enough of those. Those were wonderful. I shared those with Joseph.
Yeah, my boys read all those. Now the other ones were Little Women, Anne of Green Gables, Caddy Woodlawn, anything that, yeah, 1953. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Anything that was back in the covered wagon days, and I thought that was so cool, except that my mother reminded me that there was a high mortality rate back then, and I might not have been alive, but whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mom. But yeah, I loved all of those kinds of things. Any kind of period book.
Little House on the Prairie. Oh my gosh.
I love that. Little House
Yep.
on the Woods. Those were some of my favorite. And isn't it interesting? We kind of, and this is the true thing that happens to children. They start reading those little pre-primer, one sentence kinds of books. They build up. They find, like right now, my grandchildren are both second graders, and two of them, and they're into series books now. They're reading The Magic Tree House, and these different, and then you get okay, now I can spread out and I can find some of those favorite, Charlotte's Web, and so then they start branching out until they find another area that they're really interested in reading. So it's very cool, that that's what happened to all of you too. so we know that especially young children, the preschoolers, they love to hear that same favorite story over and over again. They love it. And then they can even start joining in, and that's a first step to reading, is being able to join in, be able to say, oh, I know that word on that page, and show you, kinds of things. But children's books are, they have a higher level of reading and good children's literature that is in the newspaper. They're rich in vocabulary. They help teach students, creativity. And like Kelsey, you were mentioning, the descriptions, help grow imaginations, and you learn new information and so on. So one of the things when we're reading to our children is to encourage them to stop and say, well, what do you think is going to happen next? What do you think is going to happen? Make predictions, discuss the illustrations, ask them to ask each other questions about what they read, and that makes it a lot of fun as we're reading and discussing the books. There's in the back page, I have a resource page with all kinds of lists of the best books, 50 books that every child should read. There's some really good things that you'll get with that. And if we have time, I have a whole pile of books sitting here that I can share of different ideas of books. So we're talking, first of all, and I know Kelsey has beginning readers, and I think you do too, Steph, right? You have a beginning reader?
Yes, I have a 4-year-old.
Yeah. So what are we doing? We want to, some of the things that it's great to see them get excited about reading, but then parents also have a lot of questions. One of them is, does my child need to be able to read aloud all the time, or is it okay for them to read by themselves? How do I help my child when they come to a word they don't know? What if my child says the book's too hard? How do I help my child if, and I can't see this slide, I'm not sure what the last question is. Oh, well, we'll get to it. But anyways, those are some of the things that parents have asked over the years. So we're gonna kind of talk about those things. So first of all, when new readers do need to read aloud, so they need to have that opportunity to say, to read the words, and hear them themselves as they're reading. And it helps them to process, to learn that whole process of how I look at the print and then I say the word. We also need to hear so that we can help them as they're reading, and they need to read a lot. So with beginning readers, you want to have a lot of those little, let's see if I can find them quick here. These little books, these kinds of little books that are, you know, filled with short text that they can read and reread those. Like my children, I had a box by their bed, a little file folder thing, and we'd read through 5 of them before they went to bed. And it was something that they knew, but it was helping them to process those words over and over and get a good basis for them as readers. So what do I do when my child's stuck on a word? That's always a big question. And how do I help them? First of all, don't tell your child the word. One of the things we don't want them to do is become dependent on someone else to tell them the word. We're going to teach them strategies for figuring out that word that they don't know. So we're going to teach them strategies. So the first thing we do is if they come to a word they don't know, we stop and just don't say anything, just give them time, count to 5 or so, and then have them and say to them, how could you figure out that word? And then I'm going to show you some of the strategies, okay? Think about a strategy for you to figure how to solve that word. And you can prompt them. So on this, we have, okay, get your mouth ready for that first sound. Look at that word. What's the first sound? Get your mouth ready. What does help start with? You know, and so you get them to say that sound. Now go back and reread it and put that sound out there and see what pops out of your mouth. Or you can say to them, is there a little word in there that you know that can help you figure out the other? Yeah, I see the word in the word. I'm trying to think of a word quick.
Thin.
What? Think?
Thin.
Thin. Do you
Thin.
see a little word that you know? I know the word in. You know what sound TH makes, put it together and you can figure out that word. We can also say to them, what would make sense? Go back and reread, look at your picture, and what would make sense? What word would fit there that would make sense? You know, we used to say, oh, don't look at the pictures. But why not? Pictures can give you clues. Use any clues that are on the page to help yourself figure it out. So we're giving them strategies that they start thinking of then on their own. Eventually, they get their mouth ready. They look for the little words. They think what would make sense there. And they go back and reread. And that's an important thing for them to do, is to be able to monitor their own comprehension and their own reading by going back and rereading when it doesn't make sense or look right or sound right, kind of thing.
I've got a question about this whole process. So in terms of our second grader, so he's a great reader, but he's not a natural when it comes to like sounding out certain words. And he reads the same like 7 Dogman books like over and over. Those are like graphic novel kind of things.
Dave Pilkey,
Yes, he loves those. But there are some really big words in there because they're kind of have a little bit of adults, like adults can appreciate them because they're kind of sophisticated comedy. So he'll get to a word and I'm just looking at this thinking, oh, I don't do any of this with him because I just give him the word right away because it's a big one, like, I don't know, like supernatural or something like that. How would you take some of these strategies I see like kind of doing these with a beginning reader and like apply them to like a second grader who, I mean, I could see how they apply already, but just maybe put that in a little bit older context.
Yeah, and I think what with second graders, they're going to be able to find word parts. You know, like if you said supernatural, they could find super, they could find nat, you know, and what would make, you know, then let's go all the way through it. You know, when a lot of good readers, they never have had to use phonics skills. They just, there are just those kids that are, they recognize words and they are off and running. So when they get to harder words, they tend to not know what to do, you know? So that the one about, does that make sense? Or, you know, think about what would make sense, go back and reread. That's the big one that will help like second graders. Go back and reread and see if you can fix it. Look for bigger words because most big words are made up of small words that we know, you know, kind of thing. So that's what I would suggest.
That's great. I appreciate that because I see like he went so quickly to the level that he's at, but he's kind of plateaued. And I want to keep pushing him forward. And I think I see where I've kind of become a little bit of an obstacle in that. And now these are all great things that I can do with him to get him.
The other thing that with that isn't bad to do, I mean, you know, is to pull out a dictionary too and have, because that's going to be a tool that he can use, especially when you get into content area reading and you need to look up, you know, bigger words and teach them to look at that pronunciation key, you know, and show them how it works kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
that's a great idea.
I mean, especially like if you're reading on a Kindle, you know, you can touch the word, it gives you the definition and it gives you how to pronounce it right away, which is, you know, so he's going to have that tool at his fingertips, you know, when he's reading on a computer or a touchpad kind of thing. So.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
I think the other thing too is, Kelsey, I know with my little guys, I'm really working on them to not be intimidated by those bigger words. Mm-hmm. Because just because it's long, they tend to look at me and go, just tell me. Mm-hmm. And so when I do some of those, I don't do all of the things that Kathy says, but some of those that it's like, okay, look, I know you can read part of this word. And Mike's a really good one to say, does that make sense? Why don't you look at the picture and see what works here? And they get the bigger words then. And that way they don't seem as intimidated next time a large, you know, longer word comes.
Yeah.
Because I would probably help them too much.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we just tend to, you know, just give them the word, but, you know, we just don't want them to be dependent on us as readers. So we teach those strategies. So, and there's other ones you can say, I mean, does that sound right? You know, sometimes they'll sound a word out and it's like, go back and reread and put that in. Does that sound right? You know, so you can ask them, does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? Kind of thing. So any other questions?
One that Steph had put into the chat was, question is, do we allow them to make up a word if it's wrong? And then she said, Ethan can read an entire book and make the whole thing up.
Well, because like, I don't know if he's like too young to actually read, but I'll say like, read me a story, you know, and he knows the story. So he reads it.
Right. And that's actually, you know what, that's a preschool test that we do, is where we've read the story to them and then we turn it over to them and say, now you read it. And it is not really reading, but it's building up that idea of reading, and it's also building up their comprehension of, they've heard the story, can they remember? It's like doing a retelling, and that's a great skill for a 4-year-old to do, is that. My 4-year-old grandson right now is just starting some of those, like I said, some of those really low level books. Can you see that? One sentence. Is that backwards to you or no? Okay.
No, that's good.
So I'll read it to him and we point to the words, and he reads and points, and we have to get that 1-to-1 match, one finger point for one word all the way through. And then he'll read it back to me. And then that's a fabulous starting point for him to really start realizing that he can read, because he can read that. And I'll say to him after he's read that, and it says, this one said, dogs learn to walk on a leash. So, okay, Connor, read it. Dogs learn to walk on a leash. Show me the word dog. And he's got to show it. And that's the word dog, and can you find the word two? Oh yeah, I know two. And so he can show me. So he's really starting to make the 1-to-1 connection between a word that he's saying and a word in print. So that's where I would start, Steph, with your son is, really find some of these books that have just a one sentence of print, and even pattern books. Like I like to go for a walk. You can even write your own. I like to run and jump. I like to swim. And he's repeating every page I like, and then there's one new word on each page, and have him read those. You can create your own, or you can find them, in stores and stuff and that kind of thing.
That's why I never want to see brown bear in my house ever again.
Yeah.
Because all he says is brown bear, what do you see? What about Mercer Mayer books?
Mercer Mayer?
Yeah, because a lot of them don't have, sometimes Little Monster has words, but a lot of Mercer Mayers don't have words.
Yeah, those are pretty easy.
Ethan can make up the story then, and it's never wrong, but you can see if he's able to look at the picture and go, oh, they're at the zoo, Mom, or I think they went to the beach or whatever. And he can tell the story by what the little monsters are doing on that page. So that might be kind of fun for him.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So
I have a question. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
So with Harper, she was like such a good reader as a young person. She was above her reading grade, you know, and now it's like pulling teeth to get her to read. She acts like it's a punishment when I'm trying to explain to her how relaxing and exciting, and you can get out of your room. I mean, we're stuck in the house, you know what I mean? And I don't want to push it, because then it becomes this like battle. So like, any suggestions, like how I get over that? Like, do I offer rewards for every 5 books read, or what do I do?
Well, number one, I think it's really important that she find something that she's interested in. Gets to pick a book, and you never know what it is with them. Informational books, like Kelsey was talking about, the graphic novels, the cartoon kinds of books. I don't know. It's just finding out something that they really want to read. And those series, what grade is Harper in?
She's in 5th grade, but she's a young 5th grader. She started early, so.
I'm just thinking, 5th grade, there's so many great books, if she's interested in history, Number the Stars, and things like
she's really kind of into anime, as Kelsey knows, and we buy her anime books, but when I say like, okay, read something, it's like she'll go to that book. I'm like, well, you already read that. Like, should I let her read it again? Or
Oh,
I don't know.
sure. Yes. I mean, she can read it again. The other thing is having family time where everybody's going to sit and read, 20 minutes or whatever. Everybody's going to have a book, and we're going to sit and read for, you can start with 5-10 minutes or whatever. And then the other thing is, and continue that interest in reading by picking a higher level read aloud that you read, and she can just sit and listen. And then, I just think, I don't know. I think about how special those times were
Me
with
too.
my daughters. And, we read, even when they were in fourth and fifth grade, we'd sit and we'd have a novel that we were reading together. I was surprised, but my Amanda read with Ben the first Harry Potter book or novel,
Wow.
and he loved it. He's not ready to read it, but they could read it and talk about it, and he just fell in love with Harry Potter, at that point. So finding something, because what's going to happen is Ben wants to read the next book, and that would be the same thing with Harper is we've read this one. Could I read the next one? Well, maybe, kind of thing. So finding something that is at her interest is key, for the unmotivated reader. And a lot of times it's informational. Smart children seem to just thrive on learning new things and finding out about new places or new adventures. I'm trying to think of something. I have this book here, The Way Things Work by David Macaulay. And have you seen that, everybody? Yeah. I mean, it is just chock full. And I mean, it's not easy reading, but it's full of all kinds of inventions and, different how things are made and all kinds of things. And they just love to read one of those pages, kind of thing. So
I want to just echo what you're saying, Kathy, because when we started doing homeschool, we got a lot of tips from our therapist who homeschools her 5 kids. And she had passed on a book to me called Read Aloud Revival. And I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's a book that was written, but it's also connected to a website. And it's basically the importance of reading aloud with your kids, especially as they get older, because a lot of us stop reading to our kids when they can read to themselves. So we started doing that. We picked up some books that, one that had sat on Owen's shelf, Pax by Sarah Pennypacker, I think is her name, that he just couldn't get into, but we read it and he was absolutely riveted by it. And so was I. I'm like, okay, stop everything else. We have to read another chapter of this book. And, but what I like about reading the Read Aloud Revival kind of how-to book first is it helps you set your expectations at a good level. In our house with our kids of different ages, we're not going to all sit around in a circle and hold hands and listen quietly to a book for 20 minutes. So I would start reading a chapter and then Owen would kind of hang upside down and listen intently, but then Augie and Elliot would go off and pretend something, but then sometimes they come back and be like, oh, what happened to the fox? And where's the boy now? And so that book helped me accept that, okay, that's okay if they don't look like they're interested. But the idea of you sitting with Harper and reading, she could be drawing the whole time, but she would also be listening. And it would just kind of build in that it would be together time for the two of you. But it would just kind of get her in the habit of, taking in a book. It's been really awesome. Some days we do it for 5 minutes. Other days we do it for an hour because the kids are really into it.
That book's
Yeah.
called Read Aloud what?
Read Aloud Revive. I'll type it into the chat.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's
You
a good
know,
idea actually, because she does like to draw like when I'm reading, you know.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. That was a good idea, Kelsey, because that is a really good thing for them to do. In responding to text, they can be drawing what they're picturing in their mind, or they can just be thinking and, you know, scribbling or whatever. I mean, I'm one of those who often, while I'm listening to something, I'll be doodling or something like that, you know, and that's fine. So.
you know, I think too, I noticed with my own boys particularly, if you read her anime books yourself, so you can talk with her about it, it's really important. There's two things that are going to be happening. You actually can have some cool conversations, and she's going to say, hey, Mom, have you read this one yet? And she's going to feel really good because you're interested in something that she's interested in. Because my one son and I, he was probably, oh, I'm going to say, what do you think, Kathy? 7th or 8th grade when Harry Potter books came out. And I was given, the hospital where I worked was given the first 3 books. And we can't give anything out without knowing what it is. So I read a lot. So they sent them home with me and said, Lisa, are these okay to give out to kids? So I handed them to my son and I said, I'm going to read this. You read this. We were back and forth. Every time a new one came out, we were like, no, I'm reading it first. No, I'm reading it first. And we had conversation and he was so thrilled. Like even with the Red Wall series that he was reading, I went ahead and read it too, so that we could have a conversation about it. I do that with my clients. That's how I read all the Mockingbird books and, you know, all of the Mockingjay stuff, because I have clients who are reading those things. And if I don't know what those are, how can I have a conversation? And when they hear that I read that book, they're like, what?
They know you care too. Yeah, and I do, Harper and I do watch like some anime shows, but I don't know if you've ever read an anime book. It reads like backwards, like right to left instead of left to right, which is really, I don't know how kids are so resilient, but for me, I can't read Japanese, like they read the opposite direction, you know. So
but if she likes anime, I bet you Kathy could go online if and find something else that might be not anime, but at least kind of pop culture that she might be able to find something that would be interesting, because Andrew didn't read fiction until he was in 5th grade. He only read nonfiction. And I mean, he read nonfiction. He didn't just look at the pictures and all that kind of stuff. And so by 5th grade, we got him started on A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those kinds of things, because they're just enough out there so that by 6th grade, he was Redwall all the way. And then the young Luke Skywalker books and all of those kinds of things. So, you know, we would read them and I'd read one or Mike would read one and we would talk about it. And he's like, you read my book? Yeah, I want to know what you're reading. Mom, what'd you think of this part? And that felt really good to him. And he could actually have a conversation about what he read.
Yeah. Yep. So, yes, you know, and one of the, I don't know, this isn't really where we're at, but, you know, like I said, there's so many fun ways to talk about books too. This is a beach ball. And so I'll read a story with the kids and then we get the ball out and I toss it to them, and wherever their right thumb lands, they have to answer that question. So who are the main characters in this story? Or you can also make your own by just having a regular beach ball and doing with you know, permanent markers or and put markers on it. And there's questions in the PowerPoint for informational and for story kinds of books, but they love doing this. This is fun for them. And then they pass it to the next person and have to answer the question. So, you know, I mean, regular conversations are great, but just changing it up sometimes is fun too. So one of the things is the problem of fluency. You know, how do you get a child to stop reading word? I call it robot reading, reading word by word. And so much of what you're already doing is that we have to encourage them at the beginning when they're first reading to point to words, to make that one-to-one connection of word to voice. But then we want to take the finger away. And one of the, here are some things that we should continue to do, to work on for new readers. So we got to do is continue to do a lot of read alouds and modeling that expression using different voices or in, you know, the intonation in your voice to change things and model that. Provide them lots of opportunities to read aloud those easy books, the ones that they already know that they're not going to struggle with the vocabulary. So those are the ones that will help them build master fluency, is reading quickly and being able to decode all the words, and then give it time. As they build up their number of books they've read, they will progress in their reading of more difficult text in a fluent manner. So then we have to make sure that they're understanding. What if they're reading, and I've had this happen so often as a teacher, the child has been reading since they're 3 or 4 years old. They just race through a book and have no idea when they get to the end what it was about or what they've read. So encouraging your child to stop and say, okay, tell me what's happened so far, and teaching them to do that in their head. But another part of that is making sure that they know how to choose a book that's just right for them when they're reading independently without, you know, we have guided reading groups in school. And if they are reading it on their own, we want to make sure that they're picking books that are not too hard and not too easy. There's all kinds of leveling systems, A through Z kinds of things, or numbering, and teachers will, in school, will test them to see what level they're at. But at home, this is what you can do. So you have the 5-finger rule. So you think about a book, first of all, that you enjoy reading. So pick something you think you want to read, you're interested in it. Then go to the second page and read that and hold up a finger for every word that you're not sure of or you don't know. If there's more than 5 words that you don't know, you need to find an easier book. Now, that's not to say that, you know, with guidance that they should, you know, read. If they're really interested in that book, they should read it, and you would work through it together. But when you're working on fluency and you want them to have something that is really at their independent level for reading, you want to have a book that they can get through without trying to figure out every single word, you know, on the page. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so for older students, grades 3 through 8, this is kind of going back to what Stephanie was talking about. So what do we do about those students that are struggling or, you know, lacking the motivation to be readers? And that's probably the biggest problem, is that we have to build reading minutes for them. If they're going to be good, just like if you're going to play football or you're going to be a golfer or you have to practice. So we have to read, and that's that is, you know, building up the number of minutes in reading, and I'll show you in just a second how important that is. So older readers often, Stephanie, this is very common, often, you know, don't want to read. So here's one way we can show them why it's so important. We're talking about like 20 minutes a day. If they can read 20 minutes a day, each day, and with older kids, you can show this to them. In 1 year, they would read 1,800,000 words, which puts them at the 90th percentile in reading. In test, when they're taking a test, they're going to have stronger vocabulary. They will be much more successful if they read just 20 minutes a day. Here's 5 minutes a day student. That student's probably going to fall at the 50th percentile kind of thing. And 1 minute a day, it's not, and this is all research-based. I mean, it is so important that they have daily reading. Questions about that? Anything?
I love that chart. I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, you know, it is building on their intelligence too, because of their vocabulary just expands so much more when they're reading. So, all right. So here's some other things that I mentioned. I said about choosing their own text when they're struggling with this. Include those comic books, informational texts. I'm going to just show you a couple. I mean, these are the books my grandkids just love. You know, it's got pop-up kinds of things. It's got all kinds of information. There's a lot to read, but just something that it excites them, you know, is so much fun for them. The other thing is partner read. So if they don't want to read the whole thing, you can sit and be partners. Probably Kelsey, you know, Elliot and Owen could probably be great partners for each other, you know, and so one person reads one page, one person reads the other page, so that it just makes it changes it up and gives them another opportunity. Having those discussions and conversation about the text are key, as we've all already talked about. You can also, in a novel or a fiction book, you can assign different readers different parts. So they're reading the dialogue, and it's a reader's theater kind of thing, which is a fun thing for them to do. And then they can perform it for somebody too. And then I had mentioned set aside a time when everyone is reading at home. So comprehension, does your child understand? Well, these are the comprehension strategies that are taught. And they're all so strong and research-based. Predicting. When we predict, then we want to read to find the answer. You know, it's really fun. Well, what do you think's going to happen? Well, let's read and find out. And it's a motivating kind of thing to do. And do that as you're reading through a novel or whatever, stop and say, all right, what do you think's going to happen next? Kind of thing. Making connections. Think of a time when, can you think of a time when something like that happened to you? You know, that making connections is a huge way for a great way for students to have a better understanding when they can connect it to something else they've read, to their own lives, or to the world, you know, and making connections of that. Asking questions. And all the who, what, where, when, why kinds of things. They can ask each other questions, or hopefully they may even have questions and say, well, why did that happen? Well, let's read and find out, kind of thing. Visualizing. I never appreciated visualizing as much as I do as an adult now. Just for an example, my book club met last night, and I really enjoyed the book, but I had some trouble visualizing this because it was a time travel book. And so it was a harder book for me to read because I couldn't make the connections. I couldn't visualize. I hadn't been to Ireland. I couldn't visualize it as well as the book I read where it was in New Zealand and I had been there. So visualizing and picturing it in your mind, what's going on, is a very important comprehension strategy. So ask them to draw a picture. All right, let's read this. And now draw a picture of what you were picturing in your mind when we were reading it, Inferring is again, making kind of a prediction, but inferring, what do you think, what made you think that was going to happen? So you're thinking about the why of your prediction too. And well, the author said this, and it made me think that this might happen, or that foreshadowing, those kinds of things that happen in books is part of inferencing. Determining what are the most important things. That's what's the key when we're reading informational text, is what's the most important thing that we need to take away from what we've just read about Japan, or about, the Civil War or something like that. And then summarizing is being able to, in your own words, tell in your own words what we just read. And that's your takeaway from it. And it's it's very important all the way through school. They're going to be asked to summarize the information that they've been given. So, and then synthesizing is probably the highest level comprehension strategy. But when we synthesize, we take what we know already about the topic, and then we take the new information and we put it together. And so our information just grows, and we come up with new ideas based on the marriage of this, our information and new information. Oh, now I understand why this happens. So I'm going to send you this, but I also was going to try and make this. I kept working on it, but I have some questions for each type of the comprehension strategies that are here that I will share with you. So, all right, here are some of those questions. So these are some questions that you can use for those different areas of comprehension when you're talking about a book. And so that's the end of what I had put together. And then the last page is the resources. So comments, questions, what else? What haven't we covered?
Well, I've got a bunch of questions. I don't know, Steph, if you have questions you want to chime in with too, if you have stuff you want to add. I know I've got a ton. I could probably talk your ear off.
No, I mean,
I
think you covered it really well. The one thing with Harper, I think that I'm just thinking out loud to myself as I'm talking, is that she's kind of going through a hormonal thing right now too. So, me telling her to read, she just doesn't want to do it because I'm telling her to do it. So,
right. Yeah.
But I love the idea of the family reading time. I just was texting Kim and telling her we are doing this every night now. And she's like, what? I go, just go find a book and meet me in 10. So, I mean, it's a little late tonight, but I'm, I really do appreciate that. It was very, very helpful. So thank you.
Awesome. So I have just a couple questions. So back to Elliot. So he basically just wants to read these Dogman books. Like he reads them all day, every day. It was really affirming, like I saw in those strategies that you had. Like he likes to sit and read them to me. He likes for me to read some of it and for him to read some of it. We like to sit and talk about it. So I think that makes me feel good. Like, okay, even though he's rereading the same book a bajillion times, like it's all really good learning for him. I'm wondering, like, do I need to try and be transitioning him into a more traditional chapter book? He's tried a few and he'll like be like, oh yeah, I read that book, but I'm pretty sure he like looked at it. He looked at the pictures but didn't read it. So how do you kind of make that leap? And is that important right now, or should I just be like heaping on the praise and the one-on-one time around the books that he really likes?
Well, I think he's fine right now, reading all of those. I think will come a time when you can introduce something else. And I think, maybe the informational, how things work kinds of things, one of the things Ben's really into right now, and I was going to run to his house and get a book, but I didn't bring it. But it says, who will win? Books. Have you heard of those?
No.
So the other day when I was there, he read the whole book and we went through it together. And it was who will win? If a lion and a tiger were fighting, who would win? And so it gives all this information about lions on one page and tigers on the other. And so you're stopping and then saying, well, the tiger is actually more muscular. And, so you're looking for all your evidence to support your position on which one will win. I mean, you're getting them to already think in an argumentative, which they have to do in SAT and all of that, is to be able to write a good argument, but to have this discussion. And there are a number of those books like that. There's even like some of the superhero kinds of things, where it's that type of book. There are so many fabulous informational type things like that I can just see Elliot being, wow, that's really cool kind of thing.
I think he would. I'm going to look for those right away. He would love that.
Yeah.
I think also don't underestimate the idea of, like right now, like Kathy said, heck, I was happy if my kids read the cereal box.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is, don't underestimate the idea of the importance that you play in your kids' lives too. So if you are reading something and go, wow, that's cool. Hey, Elliot, this is a book I really liked. He might go, yeah, whatever. But if it's sitting out there, he may go for it. Or if you say, this is, and this is a book I liked a lot when I was little. And that I love Star Wars. So this might be something cool that you might like. And again, we have books laying around all over. So the kids are always picking up something new. And the informational ones, those bigger ones, and that have all of that stuff, they lay on their stomachs and are just going through those things like you wouldn't believe. So don't underestimate that you have a big influence in your kids' lives too. They're not going to at the beginning go, okay, Mom, if you loved it, let me read it now.
Yep.
Ultimately, that's going to be a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then in terms of, Owen is like a voracious reader, reading all the time. I'm constantly like some days there'll be a day where he like panics because he doesn't have a new book to read because he's read everything so quickly. I can't get it to him quick enough. And I'm just wondering, okay, so he's 5th grade. He's in the middle of a series right now. Like, what more can I be doing for him to keep him moving forward? Or is he just kind of gonna do that on his own?
I would think he's probably going to do it on his own, but let me show you just a minute. I have here a 5th grade list, you know, of books. I've got it. So K3 is kind of this a teacher's first list of books up through 8th grade. And so you might find some great things on that list. And then there's here's 50 books all children should read before they're 12, you know, and there's,
Cool.
you know, some of those just favorite kind. So you'll have a bunch of lists that you can look at, but just, you know, when you're in the store, I don't know, does he go with you to the store ever anymore?
No, not anymore.
I was gonna say at Target, you know, just walking down the aisle where the books are and they find, oh, wow, this looks really cool kind of thing. But, or just.
Maybe he could go on with me and look at the lists.
Yeah,
if
right.
There's pictures there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And let me show you, let me see. Let's look at the 5th grade one right now, if I can. Because it gives a little picture and then a very short, like Lemony Snicket. Has he read any of those?
He hasn't.
Oh, those are great. And then Bud Not Buddy. I love that book too.
Okay.
You know, Charlie and the Chocolate. You know, these are all classic ones. Here's Harry Potter's on here, you know, for the 5th graders. And then Holes is a great one too.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Oh yeah, he would love that one.
Incredible Journey, you know. These are all informational, or I mean narrative, but you know, maybe I can look and send you a list. Bantam Toll Booth, that's a great one too. So there's a bunch on here, and these are all narrative, but I will look and send you an informational list too of
awesome
books. So
cool. What we've been doing is so I sit down with a huge list. I got a list from like the Read Aloud Revival, and then our homeschool curriculum has a list of books for all ages that fit with the topics we're learning about. So I'll sit at the computer and I'll just go to the library and put everything on hold that I possibly can. And then every like 10 days or so, we go to the library and get 3 huge bags full of books. Great. So that's kind of fun. I want to maybe include them in that process more so they can look and make like requests from me what they want, and then they'll be excited to go pick them up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's great.
Yep, those lists are amazing. I'm going to really check those out. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, other questions?
So I'm teaching Augie how to read. He's 5. And he's doing like sight words right now. He's got a little instructional book that we go through a couple lessons each day that teaches him about word blends or letter blends and how to sound out the words. And he's doing great with that. But I'm looking for maybe some little books that, like you were showing, that have like just the simple sentence at the bottom.
And I told you I'd bring you that chart thing. What if I bring some? I have a bunch. I'd like them back, but I mean, I could get you some level 1, 2s, and 3s, and he could start with those. That's what I'm doing with Connor right now, is giving him some of those ones, 1s and 2s right now for him.
We have a lot of a little bit higher, maybe like the level 2s, and they're just too much for him. I don't really have anything in that very beginner.
The other thing is have him, I think I mentioned this earlier, but have him come up with a pattern. Like I go I go to school. Where he can put in the word. So make a little book and
Okay.
just write it out. Let him make the pictures. And, he can start, then these become his books that he can read. And they read it, but then I always have them go, show me the word go, show, whatever the main word is. And then we'll go to the whiteboard and write the word go. Then we'll build it with magnetic letters, so that becomes a solid word for him, because what we're trying to do is build up those solid words that he can rely on whatever book he's reading, if that word is in there. So,
Yep. Perfect.
yeah. So,
Sounds
okay.
awesome.
Well, I will get you some books, and because I've got a bunch. I was a reading recovery teacher. I bought so many books you wouldn't believe it. So I've got a lot of them. So.
Awesome.
So anything else that I can send out? I'm going to send you Steph, I don't have your email, but
if you get it to us, Kathy, any of us, we can send it out to some of the other
okay.
too.
Okay. All right. All right.
Great.
So, all right, thanks, Kat.
This has been really awesome. So much great information. It's affirming and also motivating to keep going.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, good questions.
Yeah. And anytime you have any other question or anything, let me know. So I'll try to answer it if I can, or share information that I have to support you. Okay.
Sounds great. All right, everybody. I think we'll sign off for the night. Thanks again, Kathy.
Right.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you. All right. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.